The woman in your life will do what she must do to comfort you and calm you down and let you rest now. The woman in your life, she can rest so easily.
Hello everybody and welcome to Women's Spaces. My name is Elaine Holtz and I'm your host. And as always, I am thrilled about today's show. I have with me a special guest by the name of Julie Combs, who just happens to be running for City Councilwoman at Santa Rosa City Council this year, 2012. And you know, it's really interesting. I always get these funny kind of emails. And the one email that I got that really kind of stuck in my head is somebody asked me a question, and the question was, are you really always excited about your guest? And you know, I have to really be honest and say yes, I'm thrilled by each woman that comes on. Now, why am I so excited? Well, there's several reasons. One, I can introduce these women to our community. I mean, so many times there are so many people behind the scenes that we don't know what they're doing. Here on Women's Spaces, I try to bring it forward and let people know, hey, here's a woman who's involved, who's active, and my goal is that this woman that I'm interviewing will be an inspiration to other women who will be more willing to come out and do more for the community. And one of these women just happens to be Julie Combs. But before I start the interview, you know, I'm always reading and trying to find out different things, and I ran across this really, really interesting article, and I noticed that it never hit the mainstream media, which I find fascinating, and it has to do with women. There's a women's organization called the National Strollers Brigade, and I'm going to flash a picture, and here they are. There's 4 women that in May of 2012 went to Washington, D.C., and they were protesting, and what they were protesting was the chemicals and some of the issues around labeling for their children. And I just want to do a shout out for them, and I want to thank them. I want to flash the picture once again. Unfortunately, when I read the article, there was no mention of their names, and if you can see, it says Stroller Brigade, and I just think it's fascinating that these women would do that they would take off, that they would go to Washington, D.C., that they would meet with senators and congresspeople and have a huge meeting and say, you know something, we want a better environment and we want less chemicals in our food and in our materials for our children, especially around the fire retardants. I mean, most of us don't even know how dangerous it is, some of the clothing what we put on our children. It's amazing. So my hat's off to these women, and I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time and doing what all women need to do, and that's stand up for our children, stand up for the future of our children. Because if we don't stand up, guess what? Nothing is going to happen. And you know, women are a very, very powerful force. I was watching a movie called Iron-Jawed Angels, and it showed how we got the vote from 1916 to 1920. And I encourage all my women viewers to watch that movie because it is shocking to me. And what's so shocking, personally, when I watched the movie this time, I've seen it 4 times, but this time, I don't know what it was, but I just started crying. And after it was all over and I was driving home in my car, I asked myself, Elaine, why are you crying? And the reason I was crying was because I see that we are still in the same struggle as women, that they're trying to shut us up. And you know something, it's time for us to get louder, not quieter, and to start looking at who we're voting for. And another thing that was really interesting about the movie when I watched it again, Hilary Swank plays Alice Paul, and Alice Paul was very instrumental in the suffrage the last 4 years of the movement. And I couldn't believe what they did to her. And then I thought to myself, women don't vote? I mean, that to me is embarrassing. So I really encourage you to vote. We've got 2 elections coming up. By the time you see this show, the first one will have passed. We'll probably have new Board of Supervisor members. And then we have the next election coming up, which is going to be for the president and then locally for our city council members. So it's very important that as women particularly, we pay attention and we mark our mark on the ballot very, very important. And if you decide that you're going to stay home because that's your protest, what I suggest is find an alternative party. Why find an alternative party? If you do your history and you look at the 1930s when President Roosevelt came in and did Social Security and all the other programs, unemployment, etc., the reason there was so much pressure on the Democrats and Republicans is because the third parties had a strong voice and they were putting pressure. So rather than stay home, then your vote doesn't count. And if you stay home, then don't complain. Because what you're saying is, I really don't care, do whatever you want. And that is not acceptable, particularly to women. So 2 things, definitely vote and watch Iron Jawed Angels. Sit around with your daughters. Let them see the history of the women's movement and actually what it took us to get the vote. I mean, to me, it's an amazing, amazing story. Well, that's a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. But you know, that's the purpose of Women's Spaces, to get us all to start thinking and to start taking our power back. And there is power in the ballot, and there are some pretty powerful women running for office, and I'm about to introduce one. I want to introduce my guest, Julie Combs. Julie, welcome to Women's Spaces.
Thank you so much, Elaine, and I'm glad you were showing the Iron Jawed Angels movie. I have a picture of my grandmother that was taken a couple of years before she had the right to vote, and I look at it regularly and think with gratitude about what she did in order to help us all have the right to vote. I'm glad that we have suffrage and that we use it. It's important for people to get out and vote this season particularly.
Well, amazing that you said that, and I agree with you 1,000%. You know, Julie, I'd like to tell my viewers just a little bit about you. Of course, your name is Julie Combs, and you're running for Santa Rosa City Council, which I think is amazing. And how you and I met was on the Community Advisory Board, and I have to admit to my viewers, Julie was one of my mentors. So I guess I'm leaning a little bit towards her because of the great, great information and support that she's given me. She's also part of the Southeast Green Way campaign. She's the co-founder. The Bennett Valley Neighborhood Association, she's the founder. I can go on. And what's really interesting about Julie is that she is an engineer. She has a degree, a Bachelor of Arts degree, I believe, in engineering, and got her degree when she was, when it was a little bit difficult for women at that time. And later on in the show, I'm going to flash a picture of her when she was in high school, because she started one of the first ecology programs in her area. Anyway, Julie, the way I like to start the show out is I like my guests to just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a mother. I mean, just whatever you feel. Where were you born? A little bit of your background. You talked about your grandmother. Anything you feel comfortable in talking about.
Sure. Well, while I was born in Iowa, my family moved to North Carolina, and I pretty much grew up in North Carolina and raised my own children in the mountains in North Carolina before I was lucky enough to get to relocate to Santa Rosa. So I'm thrilled to get to move to Santa Rosa. I was a very active, busy child, and as you note, was very interested in the environmental movement. I went to high school in the 70s and founded the first recycling program in my city and in my high school. Established a bicycle club so that we bicycle commuted to school. And it's interesting to see how far so many of those things have come now in 2012, where we have a large bicycling community in town. People are interested in greenhouse gases, and it's so easy to recycle. I put my green and my blue can out this morning, and it was so much easier than it used to be.
Well, you know, for my guests, for my viewers, I just must flash this picture. Here we go. This is Julie in high school. I mean, this is in 1971. Is that true? Is that in 1970?
That's 1971.
And here she is. You know, I just want to flash this. There's Julie Combs, high school, 1971. You know, a lot of people, in my mind, you know, they say this and they say that, but when you can go all the way back to high school, it reminds me of when I first started recycling. My mother came over. She saw all these cans and newspapers. She said, "What's all that garbage in the kitchen?" I said, "Well, I'm recycling." I mean, she didn't even understand what it meant. Well, that must have been a real challenging time. And also you have a degree in engineering.
Yes.
What was that challenging for you as a woman?
It was. I was one of, probably there were only about 5 women in my class of 150, and I can't tell you how many of them graduated. There were no women engineering faculty at the time that I was going through the program. And you know, one of the ways that you can tell that something is a little bit unusual is that other people comment about it. So I would go in a room and people would say, "You're a woman," and and I would go, "Okay."
What else is
and now what? Yeah. When I was in the chess club and won, I came in second in my college chess tournament. They had pre-purchased the prizes for the tournament, and they had to go back and purchase different prizes because they had made prizes that they thought were predominantly male.
Oh, for goodness.
So it was interesting. No one expected that I would be able to do some of the things that I was able to do.
Well, it sounds like to me that you've been on the front in a lot of different areas. I remember when I went back to Sonoma State and became part of the Women's Studies Department, the fact of women becoming engineers, I mean, that was like, wow, we could do anything now. Well, after engineering, tell me a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I was, to back up a little bit, I should say, I'd like to say a little bit about my father also, because I had a very warm and nurturing father. I have a wonderful mother and I had a wonderful father both. And he died when I was 17 and I had just started school. So I was put in the position of working my own way through college, and really learned a lot about the values in our community and in our society for people going through school and trying to raise a family, really without that parental support. So I did want to mention that. And yet still, even with those difficult times, there's so many things we can do to contribute in our communities. I was, as I said, part of the ecology club in high school and then did the engineering degree. After the engineering degree, I worked with people with severe physical disabilities and designed adaptive equipment for those severely disabled people. I have a patent in that. And worked with the Americans with Disabilities Act because I thought it was really important as a civil rights action to have everyone who had disabilities have access, at least to be able to enter buildings and to have services. I just thought that was a key thing that we needed all to work on and organize the disabled students at my college as well.
Well, that's amazing. I mean, when you think about it, because those acts that were brought for disabled people were way after those years. So, I mean, you should be really proud of yourself that you did something like that. Well, bring us up a little bit up to date. How did you ever get to Santa Rosa?
Oh, my husband and I have come here summers for many years. He's a teacher. He teaches at the university level, and he would come and do summer courses here. And we adored it, and we knew that first chance we got, we would move out here permanently, and we did. And we got here as soon as we could. And when I landed here, I discovered that my own neighborhood didn't have a neighborhood association. And I was concerned, as many newcomers are, about earthquakes and disaster preparedness, and formed a neighborhood watch and a COPE program in my neighborhood, and then formed the neighborhood association. And then we discovered in the course of the neighborhood association that we had this wonderful piece of property bisecting our zip code 95405 that had been dormant since the late 50s, early 60s as a Caltrans right-of-way, and began to work on how we could make that a wonderful community asset, and that's when we formed the Southeast Greenway campaign.
Well, that's a lot of involvement. You know, one of the things I find interesting about when you're new in a city, oftentimes people complain about being lonely and how hard it is to meet friends. And definitely, I think when you start organizing or start involving yourself that way, I think it makes it a lot easier. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree. I think there are a lot of people who've even lived here a long time who are lonely. And I think we become lonely when we stay in our houses and we don't go out and walk the dog and meet people and knock on our neighbors' doors and find out who they are. And I think that's the first thing everyone can do, is greet new neighbors and knock on the doors and say hello to each other. I think that that's the beginning of community organizing, is just getting to know your neighbors.
It's just that simple.
It's
That's just
easy.
amazing. You know, I know there are a lot of projects that you're involved in, but I want to bring the folks up to date, because it's a project that I'm also involved with you, which happens to be very interesting. Is about this idea of district elections. Before we get into your city council candidacy, why don't you just talk, what is it that has inspired you to get involved with the idea of district elections?
Well, I was very surprised at how unfair the representation appeared to be in Santa Rosa. We have at-large elections for city council. That means that everyone votes for everybody who's running. And people who win often have less than a fifth of the total vote cast in their favor. So our representatives don't represent the majority of us. And in addition, if you look at the area west of Highway 101, we have very, very few people who are elected to city council who come from west of Highway 101, and hardly anyone from southwest of Highway 101. So we end up with a lot of city council members who are only from the northeast, and historically the northeast of Santa Rosa has dominated city council. And I think that that's just not fair representation for the city as a whole.
Well, I think it's real interesting. I mean, the folks will be able to see this program during the next level of elections, when we elect our president and also our city council members. And there's a little bit of gossip, or a little bit of wind in the air, I say, that we may have this on our ballot.
Yes.
So I think it's very important that people really begin to understand it, because it can be a confusing issue. Do you think that's important, that people understand it?
Oh, district elections is going to be the important issue for this election. It will change how Santa Rosa is fair in the election of our representatives. And it will really, district elections will really encourage community involvement, community engagement. People will live closer to their representative. Their representative, when they run for office in the future, will be able to knock on more doors around where they live. It will, in fact, cost the city less to run district elections, so the city will save money. It's a win all the way around, and it will have fair representation for our city this way.
I think instead of using the word fair representation, I want to change that. I want to call it balance of power. I mean, I really believe that's so important, because people don't, you know, I sat through 5 city council meetings in the last year and a half, and I thought to myself, something has got to change. Something has really got to change. And I remember when Board of Supervisors were running, it was so amazing to have Mike McGuire and Deborah Fudge knock on my door and really get to know them. Well, you know, there's so many things we could talk about, but I think as time starts running away with us here in the studio, what I'd like to get into is, what is the motivation? What motivates Julie Combs to run for city council? I know it takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of money. What is it that's motivating you?
Well, let me add one more thing about district elections.
Okay, go ahead.
And that's that if we had district elections, people with less money could more comfortably run and represent their groups in the city. And I'm not wealthy. I don't have a lot of wealthy friends. So it's difficult without district elections for me to run for office. I'm doing it because it's so critical that we create a progressive majority on our city council. People who care about our careers, not just big box store jobs, but working careers, people who care about our environment, people who care about hearing from our neighbors and our neighborhoods. And we don't have that right now. And I was asked by several people to run, but really motivated because I thought we could make a difference on council. We have a council that splits now, often 4 votes to 3 votes, and if we could just shift it over so that it was the other way, it would be really helpful in encouraging better things for Santa Rosa.
You know, it's interesting when you mention the word progressive. You know, we need more progressive voices. You know, when I think of the word progressive, and I want to share this with my viewers, I think of a progressive person is one who does not put business issues first. They put environmental issues, people issues, children issues. That to me is somewhat progressive thinking, and I think we all have to start being a little bit more progressive. You know, that's not a dirty word, that's a very powerful word, because we want to progress forward. We want to move forward in our ideas and our attitudes. Well, what are some of the things that you hope to accomplish if you're elected?
Well, I want to say that our neighborhoods are like an ecosystem, and we have to have a lot of elements in our community and in our neighborhoods. And having neighborhoods have a good voice is key, but also having our neighborhoods have parks and have vital businesses, because with those businesses we get our jobs and we get our shopping done. So having good local businesses, having a good clean environment, having a safe school. I'm a big advocate of our Safe Routes to School program, and I think kids just really need to be able to get to and from school safely. And those are goals I have. Careers, not just jobs, really support the concept of incubating small business. A lot of women, a lot of Latino women create jobs because they have the resources internally to create jobs with. They have skills that we all need to learn from. And often daycares, canning foods, all of these things can become great small businesses in our community. And we need to really help people incubate those small businesses. So while we've said progressive, I think having people have a way to express their lives is really valuable and important to us. And so I think progressive includes this concept of great local businesses and small, hyper small businesses, along with how critical it is that we have a good environment for ourselves and for our children to grow up in.
Well, I hope my viewers can understand even deeper why I get excited about these interviews, because there's so many wonderful things that are brought forward. Well, you know, we're kind of coming to the end of the show, and I thought the most important thing we could talk about, and that I wanted to leave my viewers with, is what makes you think that you're qualified to run for this office and to win?
Well, I am uniquely qualified for this office. I'm uniquely qualified because I've been involved with the Community Advisory Board, so I'm familiar with lots of different levels of the city government. Because I have the degree in both psychology and engineering, I have experience in both the hard capital improvements, public works type programs that the city is engaged in, and also in the social services, disabilities rights, homeless issues that the city is also responsible for. So unlike many candidates who are sort of one-sided or have only one characteristic, I have a combination of traits. I've run a small business, I've worked for government, I've been on a planning commission in a county, I've designed adaptive equipment. I'm really familiar with a lot of the issues and concerns of the city government, have worked with council members on solving some of our city problems. And I think that that makes me uniquely qualified.
There's one other thing you need to include in there, is that you understand people with disabilities, and that's very important. You were the first person that I've ever really interviewed that ever addressed that issue. Well, you know, we've covered a lot of territory, and you know, I know this is going to be a surprise. I always surprise my guests with this little part at the end of the show. I want you to just look at that camera over there, and anything that's in your heart, ask people to vote for you, you know, ask people to, you know, to get involved, whatever you feel comfortable. Just, it's your moment.
You're right. Thank you, Elaine, for the opportunity to talk to your listeners. When my daughter was born and I looked at her, I knew that I had to help make this world a better place for her and for her generation. And I know that's a key concern of all of your viewers, is what happens with our children and how to make the world a better place for them. I hope I earn your vote on City Council, because I hope to make Santa Rosa a better place for all of our families. Thank you, Elaine, for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Julie, and I couldn't have said it any better, and I want to wish you all the luck in the world with this election, and I know once people get to know you, to get to know Julie Combs is actually to love her. And to my viewers, wow, once again, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself here. Once again, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guest. I mean, it's so exciting to me that I can bring forward that we have a community media center here in Santa Rosa, that I can sit here and produce a show and introduce women like Julie Combs, like Susan Gorin, like Shirley Zane, and all the other, and Carolyn Bonsuelos, all the women that are going to be running in our next election. It's just so exciting to me, because it's more than a soundbite. It's really getting to know the woman inside, the values, what motivates them. And you know, the most interesting thing about Julie is that, as she said at the end when I had her do her little commentary to you folks, is her concern is for her daughter. She looked at her child and she said, what is the future for that child? And I go one step further. When I look at my children and I look at my grandchildren, I think of all children. Mm-hmm. All children. Once we become mothers, we have entered into, as far as I'm concerned, another level of consciousness where we begin to recognize what the needs are for children, and also to recognize that we are no different. All mothers are mothers, all children are children. I mean, it's amazing. I watch children from all areas of the town, all kinds of backgrounds, and they're all the same. They're all curious, they're all cute, they're all sweet. You all want to just hug them and hold them. You know, but we have to start paying attention to who we're electing. You know, I myself am ashamed to even admit this, but I have never paid as much attention as I am now in the past 2 years to local elections. The local is the ground. It's almost like you know, when they talk about grassroots, they're talking about local elections. They're talking about it begins, the buck stops here. It starts here. You know, even our Board of Supervisors just passed a resolution to send to Washington, D.C. about Citizens United. That's starting at the local level. Imagine all these local supervisors sending these letters, the impact that it has. So really pay attention. And like I do at the end of my show, I always try to encourage, particularly my women viewers, to get off your duff and do something for peace. Do something for the children. The very least you can do is write your congressman, write your senator, write your local people. Make one simple suggestion, and that is, before they write that important bill or they take that important vote, they ask one simple question: is it good for the children? If it's not, they shouldn't do it. And another simple thing you can do is vote. You must vote. I had a dear friend of mine who lost an election by 235 votes, and guess what? There were 676 people in her area that did not vote. So imagine if those 670 people would have come out and voted for this person, she would have won. And it was a good person. And the choice, to this day, I don't even want to talk about it. But anyway, there's a lot to think about and a lot to do. And we're in a place now where, as citizens of the United States, and let me tell you something, we are lucky, ladies. We have to stand up and let our voice be heard. And don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to speak out. It really feels good. I promise you, it really feels great. Anyway, this is Elaine Holtz with Women's Spaces saying thank you so much for watching, and I will see you the next time.
The woman in your life will do what she must do to comfort you and calm you down and let you rest now. The woman in your life, she can rest so easily. She knows everything you do because the woman in your life is you. The woman in your life knows simply what is true. She knows a simple way to touch to make you whole now. The woman in your